This week, we are entering into eclipse season. So, I want to take this opportunity to unpack why eclipses are so powerful for our growth game and as part of the quantum leaps that become possible and available. Also, in the context of these being cosmic amplifiers for a phenomenon that's actually always already taking place. Eclipse season happens every 6 months, but there is an every 6 month connection that is actually always cycling through that I want to speak to so that we have a more grounded understanding of and foundation around what this very real phenomenon is that you are invited to over and over to participate in connecting with your intentions and bringing that doesn't quite seem to fit, some belief that we have, some habit or pattern that we've been enacting, maybe a relationship or some agreement that we have, something that is in place that we become aware of, and we're given an opportunity to somehow show up differently, to think a new thought, to create space for a new belief, to change a habit or bring someone new into the mix, to eliminate someone or something from the mix, something that helps to reconcile a tension that we're aware of between our actual reality and the intention that we are seeding, the change that we are trying to make or call in. And so that's halfway in that waxing cycle, ultimately delivering us to that full moon, full expression of realizing in full high depth, right? Like maybe we decided some new approach halfway to that full moon. And then that full moon helps to illuminate based on that experiment what's really going on here. So the full moon ends up being this two-parter where we are both able to fully see the illumination of the revealing of what's in the way. What do we need to really let go of? What's that bigger picture of the scope of what we need to let go of, create more space around to really be able to call in and make room for what we're calling in. And it's also a celebration of what we've been able to manifest and materialize so far. So taking an opportunity, taking a moment both to celebrate what we've been able to cultivate so far in that area of our life, and also to acknowledge what we need to let go of and bring awareness to what we need to sacrifice and surrender to be able to create more space for what we want and what we're calling in. And then we have the waning half of the cycle where then we are able to have more access to our intuition, coming back to our inner world again, our reflective capacity to get even more clear what our intention is, right? Get even more intimate with and closely connected with our awareness of, our conviction around, and our commitment to whatever the intention was that we seeded, to refine that intention even further and bring us back again to that new moon space, rounding the corner on the other side, the half waning moon of again, another tension for growth. So whereas on the waxing half of the cycle, it's more becoming aware of externally manifest in our reality what might be in the way. On the other side, as we're coming back around, we become aware of more of the internal landscape of what might be in the way and what needs to shift and change and morph and adapt so that our intention becomes even more refined and even more aligned with what we truly want and desire. desire and what we really want to see in our lives and businesses. Okay, so we have this cycle playing out every month, right? Every month we have a new moon and a full moon, and we're constantly rotating between that new moon opportunity to seed new intentions and that full moon revealing of what's in the way and what we've manifested so far. And then back to the drawing board of refining our intentions and creating more space and more celebration around the things that we've been able to accomplish so far. Now, that is always happening, and it's also happening around the wheel of the zodiac, such that we are given an opportunity every year to seed new intentions in one area of our life, and then to realize the celebration of and the clearing space around the opposite territory in the full moon. So, for example, when we have a new moon in Virgo, 2 weeks later, we have the full moon in Pisces. So you can see there's kind of a beauty and a poetry to this dance of duality, where first we set an intention in one area of our life, and then over the course of the next 2 weeks, we make our way to the opposite side, where then there is a revealing of the opposite, right? We're able to make our way across to the full picture of the full territory, yin and yang, of what that is for us. And so including the illumination of the opposite side of what's in the way, what might be like competing or otherwise sabotaging what we're envisioning on that other side, right? Because it's all symbiotic, it's all related, the two sides of the equation, the two polarities that are creating ultimately this full human experience of some aspect of our lives. And so really there are 12 archetypes, but there's 6 axes, right? There's 6 pairs of opposites that create these full areas of experience for us to intend into, let go around, and to celebrate our growth within. So we have a new moon on one side, and then we have 2 weeks where we become aware of the full scope and full picture of what is supporting or sabotaging that intention that we set. And then to bring in the 6-month leap that happens. So if 2 weeks after you set an intention, you're able to see the bigger picture of what really needs to change to create more space and capacity in you to be able to call in and see through this intention so that it actually takes root into your life. So this is where I like to call it set it and forget it. If you were a child of the 90s and infomercials, there was this kitchen device whose tagline was set it and forget it. In any case, that's how these things play out cosmically when we set an intention. First, we have that 2 weeks to set it. And a big part of that is becoming aware of the full scope and full territory that we are setting that intention into that includes its opposite. And then the forget it part of the equation happens when we then move on to another cycle, right? Consciously, we're paying attention to a new territory, a new zodiac sign, a new part of the sky and reflected area in our reality that we are setting our next intention into. So consciously we move on, which means that that last intention that we set goes into the realm of the unconscious. We forget about it. We set it, we planted it, we seeded it, and now it's just part of our garden that we're going to be watering, but we are focusing consciously on prioritizing some new area of our life. So we've now forget it, set it and forget it. And then over the course of 6 months, we make our way to what will be the full moon expression in the actual part of the sky that we set that intention into. So new moon in Virgo, 6-ish months later, we have a full moon in Virgo. Now, circling back to what's the difference between just a regular new moon or a full moon and a lunar or solar eclipse. So what happens is, if you think about it, spatially in the sky, when we're talking about alignment, there's one axis of alignment that happens when we have a new or a full moon. An eclipse happens when the X and Y axis are both lined up so that the sun and the moon actually cross paths with each other. So not just in the same part of the sky of that zodiac sign, but also in the exact point in the sky where they actually cross paths with each other and we experience the phenomenon known as an eclipse. So this is where we bring in the dimension known as declination, where again, not just occupying the same pie wedge in the sky that is that territory of that zodiac sign, but in both directions, they're actually aligning. And so the reason that this is more powerful, the alignment is more precise. And so what happens is each year we have an opportunity to have a new moon and a full moon in each part of the sky. There's a beautiful rhythm that happens where this occurs monthly, and then yearly we are given the opportunity to pass over that same territory. So each year we go and we plant a new seed in that 12th of our life, or that 6th if you're looking at those polarities and those axes that are made up by those pairs of opposites. Okay, so there is also a cycling through, though, where that more precise alignment happens twice a year. So we have every 6 months an eclipse window where the alignment is even more precise. And so that's the astronomical phenomenon. We're aligning on two axes, the X and the Y axis. They're actually crossing paths with each other. And so it's like this sprinkling of extra cosmic alignment, like cosmic amplification, where it is that part of the sky, that area of our lives turn to experience a volume turn up, an amplification, a quantum leap possibility in that area of the sky, in that part of our life where we set that intention into. So it is like a supercharged pass at the growth potential of that part of the sky, that part of your life. So one thing that's really cool to note is that you have the zodiac sign in the sky. It lands in 1 to 3 of your houses, usually 1 to 2. So part of the beauty and the power of paying attention to this stuff is that you start to get to know what are the house life areas that are up for you when we're having growth potential in a certain zodiac sign. So in this case, and I'm going to speak more to this before we end this episode, we are having a lunar eclipse in Virgo. So for me, Virgo is in my 10th house. Every time that there is a new or a full moon or a lunar or a solar eclipse in Virgo, I'm looking at my business workflow specifically, right? 10th house is career and the ways that I show up to serve clients and my body of work and my work in the world, like my professional presence near my midheaven. I also have my moon in Virgo, so that's a whole nother topic of why the Virgo part of the sky is extra powerful for me, extra potent, extra rife with opportunity to have quantum shifts, quantum leaps. When I say quantum, right, it's like straying from the linear growth potential, the linear arc of what's possible, and making 3-pointers possible, where it's like over here, now we're all the way over there. Bigger leaps of growth are possible that don't make linear connected sense. We're able to take much bigger leaps. And so I'm grounding your understanding of the eclipse windows and what happens with this underlying phenomenon that's always taking place, that the eclipses just turn up for us. So a lunar eclipse is like a full moon. It's that extra aligned full moon. And a solar eclipse is a version of a new moon, that extra aligned new moon. So we are entering this week into a hypercharged full moon in Virgo. That's the lunar eclipse coming up on the 14th. So the way that we connect these dots is if we are about to have a supercharged full moon opportunity on the 14th in Virgo to mindfully let go of and release whatever's in the way of the intention that you seeded a couple weeks ago in the Pisces new moon. So this is a big part of it, is just the set it part. Bring your awareness to allow yourself to see and be shown what is in the way of the intention that you seeded a couple weeks ago, but also to look back 6 months ago. On September 2nd of last year, we had a new moon in Virgo, and the intentions that you set then, whether or not you did it consciously and deliberately, have been working on you and your reality, have been the mechanism behind the growth and change that has been taking shape in your life and reality, so that this lunar eclipse is able to reveal to you the ways that those changes have taken root. And often with eclipses, it's these quantum leaps where you couldn't even have imagined that what shifted would actually have been possible or available to you from that intention that you set. So it's like this or something greater, right? You have the conscious intentions that you set, and then the universe is able to blow your mind and reveal to you of the co-creative way that universe took that and ran with it, essentially. So again, if you deliberately set your intention, which by the way, I have a way for you to do this each lunar cycle, to submit and share your intentions to me. I have a little guide where I show you what life area to tune into for your sun, moon, and rising to help to direct you to a more meaningful and ripe area for your intentions to be set into and to have impact around. And then you're able to share your intention with me so that 6 months later, about when we have that full moon revealing of that territory, basically like the harvest after you set that intention 6 months prior, I send your intention back to you so that you can remind yourself of it and be able to see and be amazed at what has shifted for you because you set that intention. And by the way, I don't provide this service just to blow your mind, right? Just to have kind of a cute moment. No, not at all. It is a very powerful practice to engage this, because the more that you engage this, the more that you show yourself how powerful the intentions that you set are. And then the more likely you are to show up even more intentionally. It's like, what kind of wishes does a child make when they blow out the candles on their birthday when they think it's something cute? How do those wishes start to change as they mature and evolve and show themselves that the area that they tune into then actually changes, that their wish, their desire, the intentions that they set are half of the equation of the opportunities that the universe will then provide them. When we show ourselves how powerful we are to affect change in our lives because of the intentions that we set and the timing, right? Because we show up for this practice where we are mindfully setting the intentions on the right days in the life area that is ripe, where the universe is going to meet us halfway to be able to show us big growth and change, or even more than halfway when it comes to these eclipse windows. It gets even more turned up. So that's the value and the power of this practice, and why I provide this way to be able to really clearly cast your intention, and then not only that, but be able to look back 6 months later and show yourself over and over again how powerful your intention setting is. So, by the way, if this is not a practice that you engage yet, go to cosmicbee.link/new moon. You will always find the most relevant recent new moon to set your intentions around. It's okay if you're a little bit late or early. Start where you are and then make it a habit and a practice. Once you go and do it once, you'll be reminded to do it every month. And then, of course, be reminded of that intention you set on the full moons to be able to go and reflect back on the ways that it's taken root, taken shape, taken hold in your life, and actually made big change possible for you. Okay, so now that we've looked at what is this underlying phenomenon that's happening every 6 months from new to full moons, what are the amplified opportunities of eclipse season? It's basically that, but turned up on the quantum level to where so much bigger leap and distance is possible between the wishes that you cast, the intentions that you set, and the actual real life changes that become possible and available, and basically the new normal for you. This is the magic of reflecting back on the full moon, is you see how something that was just a vision on the new moon 6 months prior has actually become in some way like a new normal for you, and has just taken root into something that you would otherwise just take for granted. But you look at it and you're like, wow, actually that has changed as a new normal and a fixture in my reality because of the vision that I seeded on that new moon in that part of the sky. So now that we have that understanding set, let's look at specifically what this lunar eclipse in Virgo is making possible for us. What is this time lapse that we are about to move through? So first, I mentioned September 2nd of last year is when we seeded intentions for this. So even if you didn't do it intentionally, even if you didn't share with me or write down somewhere your specific intention that you can revisit, there are ways that you can sort of put yourself back inside of the mind of that version of yourself on that day, and what was on your mind, what was on your heart, what were you unknowingly seeding into the universe that is now come to fruition for you to notice and be amazed at, and show yourself how powerful your thoughts and wishes and desires are. And you can do this by looking back on however it is that you track yourself through time. One of the most powerful ways for me is just to look back on my camera roll, and I can see in the couple days before to couple days after, what was I taking pictures of? What was I doing? Where was I in my head and heart space? That can be big clues for me to have an aha that connects to some theme from them to now that's relevant for me. Another one could be to look at your calendar. If you are someone that lives by a calendar, there's probably going to be some clues in there around what you did, who you met. Maybe you see that you met with a girlfriend and you realize you remember like what you guys talked about, and then you remember an aha of like, oh yeah, I was telling her about how I wanted this, that, or the other to be more prominent in my life, and oh my goodness, now this is happening and I know there's a connection. In this case, it was Labor Day, if that's helpful, if you can remember what you were doing then. I can give the couple examples after looking back on my camera roll. That one, I was starting to create a new lead magnet free offering called the Lunar Entrepreneur that I'm just going to go ahead and point blank tease here. It's not done yet. I've actually been working on it since, but a big part of it is related to a lot of what we're talking about here of bringing more conscious awareness to these cycles and what your home-based cycle is relative to that waxing and waning cycle that happens every month, that you were born under a particular phase of the lunar cycle, and that has so much information from you, so much more powerfully so than anything else in your astrology chart. So it was interesting for me to look back on that. I started that project then, and although I haven't actually completed it, there are ways that that budding project has been informing me ever since, and has developed certain aspects of my work and my creative process, my inner world around what I am releasing now, what I'm working on. Anyways, I know I'm giving cryptic and teasy right now, but there's one example. I went back in my camera roll and saw that I had started that project then. And it's so interesting to reflect on where I'm at now relative to that work that I started then. Another example that I saw is that's when I got my wedding ring. My husband and I had a bit of a placeholder delay. We got married with silicone rings, and then I finally picked out my perfect ring. And now we're planning our wedding ceremony. We also had a bit of a shotgun wedding, went to the courthouse together while I was pregnant, and now 6 months later are actively planning a wedding ceremony and starting to tell people about it, which interestingly is going to be next September, 6 months later. So you can see how there are these story arcs that are playing out in these every 6 month windows of time that if you mindfully piece them back together, can see how much progress happens from one 6 month time frame to the next. So for this one in particular, let's look at the Virgo Pisces axis. So we just set intentions on the Pisces new moon a couple weeks ago. Again, that's still available for you. If you go to cosmicbee.link/new moon, you can still go set your Pisces intention so that in about 6 months, when we have a Pisces full moon, I can remind you of where you are at now, what you were dreaming into, so you can see the ways that it has become a dream come true and part of your reality in about 6 months when we have that Pisces full moon. But that Virgo Pisces axis is the space where, so with Virgo, it's an opportunity to look at and see how have your habits changed. So Virgo is all about the details and how those little habits, those seemingly little insignificant tasks, those things that we do day in and day out actually build up to be a really big part of our reality and a really big part of what's possible when it comes to efficiency. Something that may seem small, delegating one little task that maybe you were taking a certain chunk of time every single day, and that there's kind of a cumulative effect when you maybe delegate that or find some tool to do it for you, something that makes you more efficient relative to that thing. It's not just the quantity of time that it frees up for you. There's a quality shift that happens when you are mindfully doing that kind of detail-oriented hygiene and bringing awareness to how can you tweak little things here and there. And it not only carves out more time and availability for you to focus on what is going to move the needle forward more, but also it's a total mindset shift. It helps to clear more space and clutter so that you can have more of a solid connection to your bigger purpose, your bigger why, the bigger picture of what you're doing when you're not so bogged down in the details. So with the Virgo Pisces axis, with that detail-oriented hygiene, it's like reassessing the things that you do day in and day out, those little habits, those little tasks, those little details that end up snowballing. It's like the butterfly effect, right? Making one little shift in this little area can actually have a huge ripple effect to what's possible for you. And essentially, isn't that what we're talking about with this whole process, that we make little wishes, that we seed little intentions on the new moon, we set them and forget them, and we allow that ripple butterfly effect to go into motion on our behalf to make actually big sweeping, big flapping changes possible down the line. So again, there is a guide that I provide for you when you go to set your intention to look at what are the life areas that are ripe to put these ripples into motion into, that the universe is going to be able to align with and meet you halfway because you're choosing the life areas that are really being plucked for you or that are being opened, that heaven and earth is moving for you to be able to set your conscious intention into so the universe can meet you halfway. This is the Virgo Pisces axis. It's looking at those little things. So, with Virgo, what seems like a little thing is really not that little of a thing in the big picture. So it makes me think of that fairy tale of the princess and the pea. She had that stack of mattresses and she could still feel that something was just like off and not right. And it was a pea, how many mattresses down, right? That's the Virgo effect. It's something that just seems like, oh, it's not even that big deal. It's just like a little irritant, but there's a reason that that little irritant gets brought to your attention. And it's because it has the potential to make such sweeping changes for you if you focus on that little thing. So I encourage you this full moon to, again, look back to, remember back to September 2nd. What wasn't quite right for you? What got brought to your attention where you're like, I know it's like shouldn't be a big deal, but it's really been annoying me, right? This thing. And to connect some kind of a dot there of something that was annoying you then that you tuned into, that you paid attention to, and that you made some change around, made some kind of an intention, whether consciously or otherwise, that you wanted to see change happen around that irritant, around that annoyance, around that seemingly little thing, and then reflecting on what changes for you with your Pisces side of things, with the relationship to the bigger picture, with your awareness of and connection to and commitment to the bigger purpose that's leading you in your work. This is it's the magic in the details. There's a little detail that reveals something to you that ultimately makes some big sweeping change possible in the work that you do in the world, the deeper meaning behind how you support your clients, and what motivates and inspires you to get up every day and keep doing what you're doing inside of your work. And so when we speak on this level of the archetypes, it's intentionally vague, right? These hopefully will help to point you in the direction of realizing that there is something very specific. There is an area of your life in particular that was up then that we're circling back to now, that we're spiraling back to now, to connect those dots in time and to see that story arc unfolding of growth and change based on something that was on your heart, on your mind, something that you seeded into your existence and has caused change now. And this is the turned up quality of eclipses. Again, this is happening all the time, but with eclipses, we're even more likely to notice and realize, if you take a moment to pay attention, what shifted, because often what shifted is so much bigger than it would have been if it wasn't being amplified by the cosmic eclipse factor. So I hope that you're able to make a connection that truly blows your mind and just positions you to want to double down and lean in further on these every 6-month windows, this lunar manifestation cycle where you take a moment, it doesn't take long, to set your intention on the new moon so that on the full moon, I can remind you of what that intention was, and you can continue to play a more intentional, more grounded, more powerfully connected role in the co-creative process that is your growth through the connection from each new moon to each full moon and the 6-month quantum leaps that are available to you in between.